guys, and welcome to my channel, Panda Crafts. In this tutorial, I'm going to be showing you guys a Cricut hack and how I use Dollar Tree's magic cover to create stencils in my Cricut for my wood signs. I like using this a lot instead of my more expensive vinyl, and I can make a lot of signs out of it because you get about 4 feet per roll. So I'm going to show you everything on how I prep my boards or stain my board, and then how I create the stencil in Design Space, and then how I paint the sign. So here I'm just using some acrylic paint. I have like this light brown color and I'm mixing it with some water to create kind of like a stain effect. So this particular sign that I'm making, the board is 18 inches by 5 inches. And I picked it up at Michael's a couple years ago, I want to say for like $2 in their clearance section. But you could always use a regular piece of scrap wood. Just make sure the surface is sanded down and is very smooth. I ended up adding a darker brown to the water just because it wasn't as dark as I wanted it to be. So after that, I just went ahead and painted the whole thing, kind of like whitewashed it with this water paint stain. And after it was all painted with that watered down mixture, I just added a couple drops of the brown paint directly on top, since how the board was already pretty wet. And it just gave it this really nice wood grain effect and made it a little bit darker. While the board is drying, let's go ahead and head over to Design Space. So I already planned out and made the stencil that I want, but just in case you don't know how to make a stencil, or if this is your first time learning how to make a stencil, I'm going to show you how. So I just went over to Shapes and I chose Square, and I'm going to unlock it, and up here I'm going to choose 18 by 5, and then once I have that, I'm going to go ahead and lock it, and that just keeps it from being able to be accidentally resized. And then I'm going to add text, so I'm adding "This is us" in the font, I believe it's called Strong Farmhouse, and I actually downloaded this from dafont.com. It's a free to use for personal use font, and so I'm just going to take this and drag it down. It's a lot easier to see, and then I kind of just stretch it out a little bit. And then up here in letter spacing, I'm just going to go back, and this kind of pushes the letters together. And then I'm going to go up here to ungroup. This is going to make it to where each individual letter can be moved. And so I can kind of connect those letters together like this. And you can adjust and raise and lower the letters just how you want them. And then I'm going to just go over here and move this T over. All right, so that looks pretty good. So now I'm going to regroup all of these letters again by selecting them all and then hitting group, and then at the bottom hitting weld. It's very important that you hit weld before you drag it over the template, otherwise it will weld to your stencil and you don't want that. So once I get it back over the template, which is also going to double as the stencil, I'm just going to adjust it to how I want it to look. And then all I'm going to do is select both the stencil or the template and the letters, and then I'm going to click slice. And it doesn't look like it did anything until you drag those layers off, and you can see that it basically cut that out and made a stencil. And so you can actually drag and adjust and change the size with those little green arrows on the right, but I just went ahead and deleted one, and I'm going to work with the first one that I made. They pretty much look exactly the same, so I'm just going to click Make It. And then over here it's telling me that I need to load it into a 12 by 20 format just because it's a little bit longer than a standard mat. So then I'm just going to go ahead and click OK, and then go down to continue. And it says my material is currently set to vinyl, which is the perfect setting for the Dollar Tree Magic Cover. So let's go ahead and go over to the Cricut mat, and I'll show you guys how I load the Magic Cover on the mat. So because this comes on a roll, I actually like to just stick it down directly onto the mat first. That way I don't have to like mess around with using my scissors and it curling up on me. So I just like to place it down on the mat and then go back and use my X-Acto knife very lightly and then cut off the excess. I don't know, it's just a personal preference. That's how I like to do it. Just make sure if you do it this way that you don't cut super hard with your X-Acto knife, because then you're going to damage your Cricut mat. Then just load it into the machine and hit the go button. Alright, so now we're kind of going to do a reverse weeding. So when you normally take out vinyl, you would basically be taking out the letters, leaving the letters themselves down and taking off the excess, but because we're making a stencil, we're kind of doing it backwards. So we're taking out the inside of the letters, if that makes sense. So right here you can basically see our square, and I'm just going to start from this side, and I actually did it upside down. I don't know why I did that, but the slower the better with this, especially on like those little S's with like little tiny pieces. I do this all the time, even with regular vinyl. I just sometimes go too fast and I end up pulling up something that was meant to stay down, like the little dot or oval in the middle of those S's. But you can always salvage a piece of scrap vinyl and go back and basically put it back on, which is what I had to do a couple of times. So right here I actually found the piece that I accidentally pulled up, and so I'm just using my tool to kind of set it back in its place. So yeah, just try to take it slow. And if you accidentally pull up a little piece, don't panic. You can almost 9 times out of 10 fix it. All right, so now that my stencil is all weeded out, I'm going to take this clear Magic Cover, also from the Dollar Tree, and use it as a transfer tape to put it on my wood sign. I usually find this like where all of the shelf liners are by the dishes, and it works great as a transfer tape. So here's another Cricut hack that you can use for your projects when you need to transfer your vinyl. So I'm just cutting out a piece that's about the same size as my stencil. And then once I have that cut out, I'm just going to peel it off the paper backing and then put it directly on top of my stencil. I like to fold it in half and kind of find the center and kind of just let it naturally fall. And then using my little Cricut tool, I just kind of scrape over it to make sure it's nice and adhered and everything is stuck, especially those stubborn S's. So I go ahead and run that over a few times. So next I just peel off that transfer tape and pull the stencil up from the vinyl paper, and as you can see here, those S's are just giving me a hard time again. And this actually happens a lot whenever I do like cursive letters. For some reason they just like to be stubborn. So again, I just go back later and add those directly to the transfer tape itself. So after the stencil has been transferred to the transfer tape, now it's time to put it on top of the board or on top of your board. So I just like to eyeball it. You could definitely use a ruler if you want to make sure it's like perfectly centered, but I just like to do it this way. I don't like to put too much effort into this unless I was like making it for someone other than myself. So here I'm just kind of aligning it how I want it, and then I'm going to use that Cricut tool again to go over and scrape and make sure that stencil is adhered to that wood as much as possible. And then just working from corner to corner, kind of pull it at an angle slowly, and especially around those small pieces that tend to pull up very easily. And then now we have our stencil down and we're ready to paint. So next I'm going to be using this chalk white paint by Waverly, as well as this stencil brush also by Waverly. I actually really enjoy this brush, but I'm just going to start by going in up and down motions, kind of like stippling motions, and making sure not to drag my brush. And one thing I will say, I have tried using just regular acrylic paint to make signs before, and they do not work as well as chalk paint, and that's because acrylic paint is very thin, so it tends to bleed, whereas chalk paint is a lot thicker and it tends to stay in place, if that makes sense. So I highly recommend using chalk paint instead of acrylic paints whenever you're making signs, especially on wood. But I'm going to go ahead and just paint this all and give it a nice generous coat. And now is the best part, which is revealing your sign and peeling back that vinyl. And the crisp lines are just so satisfying when you're peeling this back. I love this part. And so yeah, that's pretty much it, you guys. And then all I do after that is go back with like my little Cricut tool. So I'll take my little hook tool as well as my tweezers and go back and like get those little pieces and the S's. And that's pretty much it. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, please don't forget to give me a thumbs up. And let me know down in the comments down below if you guys want to see more Cricut tutorials or more Cricut hacks or anything like that. Or if you have any suggestions, drop them down below. I love reading your guys' comments. Also, don't forget to subscribe if you want to see more of my content in the future. And until my next video, I hope you guys have a great one. Thanks for watching and stay crafty.